Hello, welcome. My name's Roger McKenzie, and this is Red Star over Sheffield. We're at the Cultures in Resistance gathering, and I do call it a gathering because I think calling it a conference is wrong, calling it a seminar is wrong. This is a group of people, group of activists coming together to look at how we can build cultures in resistance. And we're at Wortley Hall in South Yorkshire, and it is my honour, privilege, great to see two comrades and friends again. I'm with Gavin Clayton. Gavin is the CEO of Hoot Creative Art, an arts and mental health charity based in Huddersfield, and also with Ben Lunn. And Ben is chair of the Musicians Union of Scotland and Northern Ireland Regional Committee, as well as the secretary of the Workers' Music Association. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for coming and spending a few minutes to have a chat with us. Yeah. One of the session that you ran within the gathering was called If You Want to Kill the Revolution, Buy It. Who owns art? So Gavin, who does own art?
I think we do. I think the people own art. I think in an organisation like the one that I run, participants who come to work with us, obviously they own theirs. They own the work that they produce. But I think more broadly, kind of historically as well. I mean, it seems strange to think of quoting Winston Churchill in a conversation like this.
Yeah,
in a setting like this.
I need to take a shower.
I know. But in the Second World War, when it was proposed that all the artwork was shipped over to America to keep it safe, he said no, because if you move the art out of the country, then that's taking a huge chunk of what this country is. So even somebody like him, who, yes, we'll all have to take a shower after this conversation, maybe, recognize that actually that art it represented something. Even if in those days it didn't belong to us, it represented something.
What occurs to me from what you've just said, Gavin, is all the loot that was stolen from Africa.
Absolutely.
And the comments that you just made really kind of speak to me as somebody who's been campaigning for years to have that's those stolen goods, basically.
Yeah.
Because obviously it wasn't any kind of voluntary thing to have those things returned to where they belong. And the thing that I hear all the time is, but they just wouldn't be able to look after it properly, and that's why we're not sending it back.
You should go to Egypt and look at the new museum.
Exactly.
So that valuing of art, governments do value it. They do recognise it represents something. But when was the last time you saw a politician photographed at the theatre or at a concert? Keir Starmer's quite happy to be photographed at Arsenal. Right, but he was. So that relationship with the value of art, they recognise it, but they don't kind of promote it in that sense. They don't try and reinforce that connection between art and what it can represent, and the sort of art that's being created here by our Indonesian comrades who are part of this event. They don't blow the trumpet for that.
Yeah, Ben. I was about to just to add on to that. When we think about the value of art, there is the question of the ownership of the infrastructure is another sort of thing to sort of consider when we look at how people value it in the sense of this is like these are the seminal works of our time and so on. And when you look at the infrastructural elements, like just who has access to sort of learn to do the craft, who gets the access to actually be able to slug it out and actually attempt to go into the industry as well. So for example, it's been pointed out that only 14% of people working in the arts consider themselves working class. So that shows that there is a gap at some point between either basic education or just actually slogging it out within the industry that allows working class people in, which then what that means is then all the values of like who gets the awards, who gets praise, all the music criticism or other art criticism and so on is then literally shifted to a different class perspective as a result of all of that, which then further creates these various different dynamics where working class people trying to make art are seen as less or outsider art, or it just looks a bit naff in all this other kind of stuff is then used to then just keep it in its place. And then you then also fall into the daft questions of the very sort of bourgeois approach of art is for art's sake and not related to life, because once you're at that position where you are just talking about art completely separated from society, you can talk about it in such a naive manner, whereas actually for a lot of working class people it is just deeply tied to life, because what kind of art you're able to make is literally defined by what's around you, what opportunities you have. So you have to use what you have to be able to make art.
That again, that kind of reminds me of the kind of black arts movement in this country, and the way that, because there's always been this thing, really, hasn't there, about black people aren't really part of the working class sort of thing, when absolutely, of course, well, we bloody are, so when those black artists, 60s, 70s and 80s, and particularly the 70s and 80s that I remember and were in contact with during that period, and were producing art that spoke to our experience. And for me, that's one of the challenging things for us, is how we can make sure that we tell our own stories. And for me, that's part of the who owns art. Well, it's almost like saying, well, who owns our experience? It seems to me, but also part. Yeah, but
if you think about the origins, when human beings 40-odd thousand years ago first started creating what we might now say view as art, whether that's cave paintings or small bone, antlers being carved, it was precisely that. It was a way of representing the world to one another and sharing your experience of that. And I think that's the sort of work that's represented here at this event, and the sort of work that we do and others do within the community arts movement or within the creative health movements. It's very process focused. Some of the outcomes and the outputs are amazing, but it's process based. It's that relational activity and the connection, individual connection that's made, communal connections with the environment, which obviously have a lot massive impacts on less developed countries. Then we can come on to that another time, perhaps. But so that maybe that's what why governments, why the powers that be don't promote it in the same way and don't recognize that value, because actually what it's doing is creating spaces where people come together and they start cooking up ideas about how things might change. Like this event over the last few days, they get together, they realize, hang on a minute, this isn't fair, that's not fair, we're being treated in a certain way, we're not given the access to opportunities in the same way that others are. How can we do this differently? And they come together within the creation of songs, music, storytelling, visual arts, representing movements, again, like the Indonesian group here, in terms of protest, and that's subversive to the establishment, to the powers that be. So maybe there's a connection there in terms of who has the right and who is given the right to create stuff that is then consumed. And I think that's where we are in a way.
And it's just also building on those points. The other thing that's really kind of curious, if you compare Britain to lots of other European nations, one of the big differences we have, has always sort of been alluded to, is the fact that, say, France, Germany, Italy truly value culture in the sense of that it is deeply tied to national identity. And it is, admittedly, particularly in the current circumstance within Italy, it is a very reactionary vision of it, but it's still very much that sense of there's that continuous line between sort of radical to right-wing to the centrist view, that art is the nation's to a certain extent, and that vision then allows it to keep lots of access to it because there is that element to keep it within it. Whereas with Britain, we've shifted more and more into that Americanized model, which is he who makes the most money is the best artist as well, which then creates all of these various different problems where, like, organizations, even like opera houses, are having to be profitable and not just for the sake of an institution, and all these other kind of elements, which, even though prior to sort of neoliberalism, it wasn't necessarily in the hands of the working class, it's further confounded a problem in that instance, which I think we always need to keep an eye on, where when we're trying to think of building these broad alliances, it's these kind of questions which we can even get people wealthier than us who can maybe pay for promotion for campaigns or something like that would be really helpful. And it's those kinds of things we need to also keep in mind.
I mean, given the challenges, the issues that you've both raised, I mean, we're obviously here at the Cultures in Resistance gathering at Wortley Hall. Manifesto Press, a load of other organisations have come together to look at these kind of challenging issues. I mean, what do you think is the role that art can play, or the arts can play in building these cultures in resistance? I mean, we've raised kind of big challenges here, but I mean, we've got to believe that there's kind of a way of working our way through.
I think it's the point I was making earlier, or part of it is that point I was making earlier about bringing people together, and the relational context of what we do, and the connections that are formed, and the recognition and the allyship that is built in the groups that take place at Hoot, the relationships that develop between participants who all have very different experiences, but they're all going through similar challenges. They're all experiencing some sort of mental health challenge, varying degrees. And so I think it can allow people space to be with that, and to be vulnerable, and to be amongst other people who have similar vulnerabilities, and it allows people to recognize a different part of themselves and actually surprise themselves. And I think that can inspire individuals to become more active politically. I've seen it throughout my career, sort of 25 years work, starting in arts and disabilities work, through hospital arts, and then into arts and mental health. The growth that people experience through engaging in cultural activity and creative activity themselves, their horizons widen, and they literally can lift their heads up and feel stronger and more assertive in the world, and for themselves, but also for their comrades, although they might not use that language. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about camaraderie, relationships, human connection to the world, connection to the issues in the world, and that it feeds you. It can feed you, and that kind of exchange and growth is a threat to the powers that be. But it's a that's why I do this work. It's to have those small revolutions for individuals and within groups that happen, and maybe they lead to other things in the future. But it's that it's the relational base. That's what it is.
So from my end, there is one quote that is burnt into my brain from the English composer Alan Bush, and so he's very active in the labour movement throughout the 20th century and was very heavily demonised as a result of it. But he had this just one very succinct quote about the relationship, which is, "Music has never won a revolution, but it can allow to people to see more clearly and to act more bravely," which I think is a really important sort of distinction, because at the end of the day, it isn't music that is sort of like going through the gates of the Bastille or anything like that, but everyone going in has a song to sing about that, because every single revolutionary movement, and even counter-revolutionary movements, had art to go alongside it, because with that much sort of radical energy happening, there is just a creativity that comes with it. And that's the sort of part of the role that it can play. It can be a learning tool. It can help sort of point to say, these are, say, your political enemies. This is a vision of what we could build. All this other kind of stuff, which is really vital. And so even come back to that initial basic thing of art was originally just a point of information. It still is to that certain extent, and we can just need to weaponize it more. I think is really important.
Yeah, I was talking with Molly and Lamini from the South African Communist Party, who you have the honour of being with us at this gathering, and we were reflecting back, and we watched the London Recruits film last night, and we were reflecting back to how important music and dance was to keeping people together. And I remember one scene from London Recruits where the apartheid regime were taking 8 of the resistance fighters, basically, to be executed, and the rest of the prisoners who were on death row.
So amazing.
So powerful to me.
Makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck.
I was thinking about this, but after, I remember the first time I watched that, and I remember thinking, this is how important music is. This is how people connect together, and can sometimes stay together because they can connect over a music that can give comfort to those who are about to be executed, maybe, but also give strength to all these people singing who know any of them will be the next eight.
But even sort of just going to other examples, building on that, things like, say, Cozy Sikalele, just that in and of itself was vitally important. One, because it became a very broad song across Africa, but also in parallel, thinking of like folk songs in Wales and Scotland, it was a way to keep their language alive as well, which is another really important thing to sort of consider. And it's, the power of it, just bringing people together, and just that clarity of a bright future is astonishing, and it does just lift people up in a magnificent way.
So I suppose one of the ways that we can build cultures in resistance is to remember and promote the importance of the arts.
Absolutely.
And widen the opportunities for people to be involved, either to look at it, to listen to it, to watch it, but also to take part in it.
And feel they've got they can have an opinion. They can have a view on it. It's that idea that, you have to be an expert to have a reaction to a painting. That's because we've been taught that you have to be an expert to be able to have a response to a painting or a piece of music. But you're going to have a reaction. And if you can hear your own reaction and voice it, that's, that to give people the freedom and the permission to have those opinions and to have those views, and maybe then even make their own work as well. I mean, that's a great gift for people.
Just to wind up, because just kind of reminding what you just said, Gavin, about when I'm asked to write a review of something for the Morning Star, which I kind of I always kind of shy away from, because I've got this thing embedded in my head that, apart from jazz, what do I know about any kind of art, really? But I forget that there's a feeling, and there's, as you were saying earlier, does what I see or hear or read, does it make the hair on the back of my neck stand up? And if it does, how can I explain that? And I haven't got to, I don't need to have gone to university forever, and there's no denigration to people who do that, but I haven't got to do that. I can have an opinion and a feeling and an attitude towards art.
Because you're human.
I was about to say, or just simply, it would be a bit like saying you're not allowed to see until you're an expert at seeing. It's just a simple thing, because at the end of the day, the arts, at the very basic thing, is just sensory stimulation to a certain point, and as soon as you bring it down to just that point, everyone can react to it and has something to say about it in some form.
Can I thank you both very much for spending a little time with us. So this has been Red Star over Sheffield, production of Manifesto Press and Red Star Media. I'm Roger McKenzie. Thank you again. Buy books from Manifesto Press. Morning Star is a partner in this venture as well. So please subscribe to the Morning Star, the world's only English language socialist daily newspaper. Support Hoot Creative Arts as well. Make sure that you look at what they do and give them as much support as you can. Listen to live music. Support live music. Yeah, for sure. We all have to record stuff and listen the best way we can. But there's nothing better in my view than listening to live music. And why not take part as well, and maybe learn an instrument or something. So can I thank you again? Thank you all, and good luck. Stay safe, and solidarity to you all.